Well, just to give you an idea of where I'm at the moment at the final stages of submitting my doctoral thesis on dance copyright. I've been a dancer, trained at the Royal Ballet School, performed professionally, gave up dancing, became a lawyer, and gave up law and came back to the profession, theatre profession. I'm now a lecturer in a dance college at a BA course called from the college called London Studio Centre. So I'm very much making a living as a lecturer, but also doing research part-time. I started the research October 2006, and hopefully will be finishing by this calendar year. So with that kind of background, you know, I think I was on the right track in trying to research how choreographers secure their rights. And also to tell you that I am trained in Banish notation, so I can write dance down. But do I do it? No. But I can read. I'm literate, in other words. But there are many factors that confront the choreographer when they have to secure their copyright. Mainly because the art form of dance is ephemeral by nature. And it has survived for 4 centuries, since the time of Louis XIV till now, without the aid of script or text. There were occasions when notation were used, but not universally, as in music and in plays. So one of the major problems facing the copyright is to satisfy the prerequisites, the statutory prerequisites of copyright. One is this fixation on fixation. And that's where dance fail miserably. Mainly because it's an entrenched practice that dance is communicated from feet to feet, as the choreographer Mikhail Fokin says. Mainly because the oral tradition in the creative process and the restaging process is an entrenched practice. And as a consequence, dancers are illiterate. They do not prepare for rehearsals by reading a script or a score. So in that way, the practice has made it almost documentation as not an integral process to the creative process. Choreographers do not write down the choreography. A few have done so, but it is not general practice. As a consequence of this requirement, a few choreographers are a bit wary of securing their rights in court, mainly because of the ambiguity of their position, and they're not confident of success in litigation. And another factor with regard to that is the question of proof. Burden of proof is on the claimant. And without tangible evidence, it creates problems, which I shall deal with later. The question of how the choreographer creates is also another obstacle to their success in obtaining a lucrative return for their creativity, mainly because choreographer has to work with certain tools, one of which will be a studio, dancers to mold their expressions on. They cannot work in isolation like a composer can, and a playwright can work in isolation. A choreographer is a dependent artist. They depend on an infrastructure in order to create. And that, again, creates this obstacle in the process of building a work. And therefore, documentation is a luxury they cannot afford, because all the time and the investment is in securing that the work is created and performed. As a result, the idea of securing copyright is not a main object, it's not preoccupation for the choreographer for these reasons. And also because choreographers have always been a servant rather than a master. When choreographers first started, they were ballet masters in the royal courts, or they were attached to a theatre where they were servants of the theatre managers. And then come the 20th century, they began to exercise more agency and they worked as independent contractors. But nevertheless, because of what I've said about the production process, they were still hampered in their independence and their agency, and they were still subject to the constraints of obtaining favorable terms for their services. And the idea of ownership of their works is a 20th century concept for the choreographer. Before that, because they worked for masters, they had no legal rights to their work. And right up to the recent times, choreographers took liberties with other choreographers' works and adapted them freely. Petipa adapted works by his predecessor at the Royal Russian Imperial Theatre and interpolated the productions with his own choreography. And this was an accepted practice. And it was only in the 20th century with choreographers being more aware of their rights that the idea of ownership and authorship entered their minds. And it is almost become an entrenched idea that ownership is not an important element in their mindset, mainly because of these factors. Fokine worked with Diaghilev in 1909 when he left the imperial household as a servant to work with Impresario Diaghilev. The Russian ballet Russe, went to Paris and conquered Paris. And they had a few seasons, very successful seasons, where Fokine established himself as an accepted position as a choreographer. And yet, when he lost favor with Diaghilev, and Diaghilev installed his favorite, Nijinsky, as a choreographer, he lost control of his works. And he could not exercise his rights. Leonid Massine, another choreographer with Diaghilev, he worked with the successor. Diaghilev died in 1929, and his successor, Colonel de Bassel, started the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, another company that inherited the repertoire. And he sued de Bassel for ownership of his rights in 1938. And the court decided that they were works for hire. And even though dance had been recognized as a subject for copyright in the 1911 Act, this was in 1938. And because of the lack of understanding of the court with regard to the status of the choreographer as author, they said that because choreography was part of the whole production that includes the set, the music and all that, it couldn't be excised from the whole production, and therefore the commissioner owns the entire work.